It goes without saying that today's video was filmed before lockdown. It's a throwback to a great show from last year, and I really hope you enjoy the cars on display.
Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC. Now you may have noticed I've got my raincoat on, which is because A, it's autumn in Great Britain, which means it's pretty much raining all the time, and B, we're at the British Leyland Autumn Rally and it's the last show of the year and one of the best. So it's sod's law that it started raining today and the weather has been horrendous. So there's a few less cars than we'd expected today, but the show has still been incredible. So in this video roundup today, I'm going to show you some of my show highlights, some of my favourite cars, and I'm even going to chat to one or two people as well about their special cars. So excuse my hair because obviously the weather has been dreadful. I'm going to show you around the show and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it as much as we have. So let's go and have a look at some amazing British cars.
Probably one of my favourite cars here today, and of course I'm biased because I've come in my Metro Jill and, well, I'm parked up at the Owners Club and it's fantastic. So the Metro was launched in October 1980 as the British car to beat the world. It was first known as the Austin Mini Metro before dumping the Mini bit later on, and it became the Austin Metro. So it was made under British Leyland between 1980 and 1986, and it was then later on made between 1986 and 1998 under the Rover group. So it was known as a few different things. It wasn't just known as the Austin Metro. You could have gone for a more sportier version if you're that way inclined and gone for the MG Metro, and for the person who doesn't like too much change, the model evolved from the Austin Metro into the Rover Metro, and later on evolving into the Rover 100, which included the rather fun Rover 114, which is an incredible drive, by the way. Just like its cousin, the Allegro, it ran on hydrogas suspension, which means that a lot of these get dumped, not only because they are great donor cars for the Mini, but because the hydrogas goes as well. So it's one of those things. And of course, the predictable issue that everybody wants me to mention, the rust and rot on the cars. But if you maintain these, they are great cars, because I've had first-hand experience of owning a 114 and obviously my Austin Metro, and I found that the Rover 114 rotted away, but my Austin Metro has been fantastic, and it's all about just keeping on top of those little bits, keeping on top of the rust traps, because they're not the terrible cars they're made out to be. The handling is very quick, it's very responsive, and if you go for a 1275 like I've got, they're quite nippy too, and you can keep up with modern traffic, and you get a pretty good fuel consumption too. And in fact, cars such as the HLE boast up to 50 miles per gallon. Fantastic. The Austin Maxi is one of my favourite BL cars, which is probably no surprise because it was designed by one of my favourite people, Sir Allegro, who also designed the Mini, the Morris Minor and the Land Crab, allegedly his favourite design. The car was sold as something different, which makes it no surprise it was badged as an Austin, because as BL moved away from badge engineering, they wanted to establish Austin and Morris as two separate identities. Morris was the Ford competitor with sensible ideas, and Austin was the wayward brother, sporting different ideas, state-of-the-art technology, and something different for the customer. And different it was. Many people know the Austin Maxi as the car which has seats that fold down into a bed. However, it's so much more than that. The Maxi was, at the time of launch, the only hatchback in the BL range, and was sold with the strapline all the fives, because not only did it have a hatchback, giving it the 5-door status, it also had a 5-speed gearbox. It might seem basic in 2020, but back in the day that was cutting-edge stuff. Just like the Allegro that was created to replace the ADO 16 cars, the Maxi was brought in to replace the larger Farina cars. However, unlike the poor Allegro, which was stitched up with various hand-me-downs from various other cars, the Maxi offered something new, properly new, for buyers with a whole new engine and gearbox. Now at the time, it was questioned why they developed a 5-speed box, which seems ridiculous. The answer was simple. It was essential for cruising at high speeds for longer, meant the car was less noisy when driven at speed, and allowed the driver a more pleasant and refined driving experience. The car was developed in the mid-60s, which was a real new age for motoring. In the UK, motorways had begun to sprung up across the UK, and drivers saw themselves going further for longer and needing that top speed capability. Interestingly though, not everything was new, because the car did recycle some parts. The doors were borrowed from the 1800, which meant the design was hugely hampered, because if your door size is dictated, the rest of the car is too, to a massive extent. which meant the car received a few makeovers, including the front end design, which some people said was a bit mismatched. We look at the Maxi today and many love it. It's well designed, it's comfortable, and it's pretty cool. However, press at launch just weren't convinced for many reasons, including the weird cable gear change, which made finding a gear a bit of a challenge and was changed later on in the production lifespan, and the suspension, which was later changed for hydrogas, as seen in the Allegro and Princess. However, it did stand up in terms of handling and ride quality, and it also offered people looking for a bigger estate type car an attractive proposition. Lots of mistakes were made by BL, from not truly considering what the competition was doing, to pricing and daft ideas like creating cars in their own range, such as the Princess in 1800, which cannibalised sales. The Austin Maxi is a car which you rarely hear a bad word said about, unlike many other 70s BL creations. So whilst the response was a bit poor at the time, they are well liked in hindsight, and with a thriving owners club and prices climbing a lot quicker than many other 70s BL cars, I think we'll continue to see a healthy selection of Maxis at car shows now and in the future. Now let's go and have a look at some other fantastic BL 70s creations. The Morris Marina is actually a car people love to pretend they hate, but they forget it was one of the best-selling cars of the 70s, and it was the UK bestseller of 1973. However, it's also the most scrapped car, which isn't entirely the fault of the car itself, but sadly the engine, gearbox and brakes. They make a brilliant donor car for the ever-popular Morris Minor, and back in the day a Marina was a cheap car to buy, which meant you could afford to pull the guts out of it and plonk it into your Morris Minor, which gave you a bit of extra speed and extra safety with the disc brake conversion. The time of the Marina launch was that pivotal point in the BL history where Morris was being established as a brand to fight Ford, and any Ford likeness you may see in the model is in part down to Roy Haynes, who designed the car and had been pinched from Ford, where he'd worked on the Cortina, Zodiac and Zephyr. Now, the Marina wasn't just a hit in the UK, and it sold abroad in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and Malaysia. Although if you are watching from Australia, you may know this as the Leyland Marina, which not only sported different tweaks like grille etc, but you lucky lot also got the 2.6 litre engine option, which I would absolutely love in mine. Now, whilst we explore this bit of the show, you'll also spot the Itals too, which was the successor to the Marina, but didn't see the same long shelf life of 9 years that the Marina enjoyed. The Ital was actually only made from 1980 to 1984. The Ital competed in a growing market where BL was fast being overlooked in favour of other manufacturers who had seemingly got a better handle on build quality and strikes during the 70s, and therefore surged ahead faster with progression of models. However, despite all this, the car still sold reasonably well, and that was due to the low running costs and the competitive price. And interestingly, it retained the rear-wheel drive of the Marina, but went up against other front-wheel drive cars such as the Vauxhall Cavalier, and in fact, rear-wheel drive was so rare by this point that the Ital, along with the Cortina and the Sierra, were the only mass-produced cars of the sector offering rear-wheel drive. It's also worth noting for those who like facts that while this is often thought of as the last car to wear the Morris badge, some Austin Metro vans were badged as Morris in the first few years of Metro production. And then the Ital was replaced with the Austin Montego in 1984. Now, before we head off, let's have a chat with Chris Whedon, who has joined us today from the Marina and Ital Register, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his car.
Hi, my name is Chris Whedon. I'm the chairman of the Morris Marina Owners Club. This is my car. What can I tell you about it? Let's start with why I bought it. I bought it in 2003 with a view to going classic rallying. Never did that. Never got around to it. Didn't have the time or the money, truth be told. My Marina was originally a 1.8 single carb coupe, and over the years I tuned the 1.8 engine, and then a few years ago I had the opportunity to buy a BMW motorcycle head, which I know will fit the 1.3 engine. So I had a 1.3 block, and so what you can see under the hood here is the result of that, with a twin cam BMW motorcycle head on a on a British Leyland A series block. In terms of what else have I done to the car, it's got a 5-speed gearbox from Ford Sierra. The front brakes are Princess calipers, 4-pot calipers with vented discs, and I'm working through the rest of the car to upgrade the suspension. It already has telescopic front shock absorbers that I fitted some years ago, so overall it's not particularly standard, but I like to keep it looking as standard as I possibly can, so to give the people a few surprises on the road.
I recently did a video on the Austin Allegro actually, but I mainly focused on talking about the model I was reviewing, so here is a little more info and recap on the Austin Allegro in general. The Allegro is a car which has unfairly coined the nickname All Aggro, usually from the kind of people that buy a terrible example and expect nothing but absolute reliability. If you speak to an owner today, you're hard pushed to find one that will slag the car off. And in fact, with a thriving owners club and a very active positive Facebook group for the cars, the problems surrounding getting hard to find parts almost becomes something you can forget about if you choose to enter into ownership, and I'd recommend you do. Now, although the Allegro is very different to the car which Harris Mann first imagined, it was up against it from day one as it had to follow a very tough act. The ADO 16, which is better known as your 1100 or 1300. Although the ADO 16 in its various guises sold just over 2 million units, 2.1 million to be exact, the Allegro failed to reach the same heady heights of success, due in part to its trailblazing design, the crumbling reputation of BL in the 70s, and I'd hate to admit it, but the sometimes iffy examples that rolled out the factory, which meant it sold less than 700,000 units. Which is a shame because the Allegro offered a lot and is still a great classic to pick today. The cars that you see here today are all running hydrogas suspension, which even if you buy a knackered example, it only costs around £700 to replace everything, and it offers a ride and drive experience which, in my opinion, is largely on par with many budget modern cars of today. The hydrogas system designed by Sir Alex Moulton is said to be like riding on a magic carpet. And then, although very early Allegros didn't allegedly get it quite right, the hydrogas suspension system was so well regarded that they added it to the Austin Maxi, which had launched on hydroelastic suspension, like the 1100 and 1300 range, the 1822 series and the Princess, the Austin Metro, the Ambassador, and later on the Rover Metro and the Rover 100s, and then into the MGF too. And that's well into the 90s. And in fact, they didn't do away with hydrogas until 2002. Not only that, although maybe the car didn't offer the customer what they wanted visually, it addressed a lot of concerns which people had expressed on the ADO 16 cars. More space was added around the engine and in the engine bay area, which allowed easier access to work on the car. Safety and crash outcomes were, well, finally thought of, with more space dedicated in the engine bay and boot to take impact, and the doors were designed to offer what I would consider a very primitive sort of crumple zone. Not only that, the rust had been a huge issue on the 1100 and 1300 cars, and rust proofing was added from new and rust traps were addressed. However, despite all the positives of the Allegro, the press, which influenced public opinion to some extent, just weren't that impressed. Complaints were made around the car being slower due to the greater weight in comparison to the earlier 1100 and 1300 cars, and also, quite boringly, they were puzzled by the Cortic, or as you may know it, square steering wheel. Plus complaints around the bloated, more rounded feel to the car in a world of sharp lines and a squarer finish were also touted as reasons they didn't like it, which is actually quite unfair, and in my opinion, I just don't think the world was ready for the Allegro, because nowadays you're seeing the same square steering wheel being used on these sportier high-end cars, and cars are forever becoming more rounded, more bloated, and safety in a crash is one of the most important design features on a car, along with making sure that the car doesn't rust. So really, the Allegro is a bit of a trailblazer in some ways, and that's before we even start talking about the hydrogas suspension. Anyway, I am going to confess something. These aren't actually my favourite cars in the BL lineup, so they never get a massively glowing review from me because the looks of them just don't appeal. However, I will absolutely go against anybody who thinks these cars are terrible because the Allegro deserves so much more praise than it gets. Although it's not the car that I would look at in the car park and think, wow, I love how it looks, because the front end is not quite what I would pick on a car. They are absolutely exceptional to drive, and it's so much nicer in many ways, and I hate to say this, it's so much nicer in many ways to drive than my Marina. It sometimes feels a lot more solid than the Metro, and well, they're just great cars. I thought I'd give the more modern classics some airtime too, so I popped over to see the Rover 200 and 400 Club. The Rover 200 started as a Honda Concerto-based car, codename R8, with more luxuries added in 1989. The booted version was the 400, and it was a class leader. It was launched alongside the new range of K-Series engines, which won awards for design at the time, but nowadays you mostly see them getting the mickey taken for blowing the head gasket. They came in a 1.4 and 1.6 variant, and then a Honda engine auto. Afterwards, a 3-door model was launched, available in a 2-litre GTI form. A coupe, aka the Tomcat, was launched, and a cabriolet. A minor facelift came about in 1993, which added a grille and triangular side lenses, and new interior options too. In November 1995, the bubble-shaped 200 was revealed. It was very well received in terms of looks, but it was pricier than the competition and smaller in the back too. However, it sold pretty decently, with 500,000 units sold worldwide, roughly. And in December 1999, its replacement, the 25, was launched, which had suspension from the 200 VI, making it very agile, even as a 1.1. The 25 was more affordable than the old 200, and it competed in the same market as the Fiesta, Corsa and Polo. And in summer 2004, it even got a facelift. And overall, around 150,000 25s were sold in the UK alone. The Rover 400 was launched in March 1995 to compete with the Montego and the Vectra. But realistically, that was the Rover 600's job, and the 400 really should have gone against the Escort, the Astra, the Megane, and you could have again gone for that 1.4, 1.6 K-Series option, or a 1.6 auto Honda engine, or a 2-litre diesel, or a 2-litre T-Series petrol option. They were good sellers, but due to the Honda licensing, they lost money on almost every car they sold. The Rover 45 replaced it in January 2000 with all new suspension setup and front end too. It's really weird seeing stuff like this at classic car shows, because I'm of an age where I remember these cars selling for 50 quid in the back of the paper, which kind of makes it more special that owners clubs have been set up to save cars like this, because it's the 80s and 90s cars which are so very unassuming, which are fast disappearing. So nice to see so many of these cars here today. Now that we've had a look at these, let's go and have a look at the 800 and 600 cars. The BL Autumn Rally also has some pretty new classic cars, such as these 600 and 800 series cars. The Rover 800 is a misunderstood beast. I always thought it was a bit of a slow, boring car, but I took out a Sterling last summer, my reviews on the channel, and I quickly found myself siding with the 800 Club, who are fierce defenders of these cars. Once benchmarked by Alan Partridge as a far more favourable option than the rebadged Mini Metro, the Rover 100, the cars, whilst relative newcomers to the classic car status, have a thriving club established by Alex Sebinger, with a great community on Facebook and a support network for those hard-to-find parts such as header tanks, the Mark 1 scuttle trims, fuel filler necks and much more. The 800 is also a car with a bit of kudos to it. The Queen owned one, they were used by the police, and Tony Pond took the 827 onto the Isle of Man TT circuit, where it became the first production car to average over 100 miles an hour around the course. It was also sold in the US under Sterling branding, but it just wasn't the hit the Rover planned. You'll also spot some Rover 600s here. Now, the 600 was a Honda Accord based car, which was launched in 1993 and sold over 100,000 units before production ended in 1999. It was a successful car and well thought of, due in part to the reliable Honda engine. The TI model had a T-Series engine, and the car competed in the same market as the Ford Mondeo and Vauxhall Vectra. Now, I've had a look at these fantastic cars, so let's go and have a chat with a slightly bonkers owner called Sam Mays, who couldn't bring his own Rover today, so he's pinched a friend's and is going to talk to me about it.
Aha! Welcome to Milton Keynes Autumn BL Day. I have bought this, made famous or infamous by Alan Partridge. Of course, it's the 800 that we all know and love. This isn't actually mine. It belongs to a friend of mine who very kindly let me take this today because mine is not dead, it's just resting, to quote Monty Python. This is an 820 SI, so it's not poverty spec, it's not the full fancy nonsense spec. So it's got a few toys on it. You've got toys like auto changer, which I don't think I've actually got in at the minute. Leather covered gear knob, which if you come around here isn't on the vehicle at the moment, because all Rover did with the leather covered gear knob was they put a weird, vaguely disturbing leathery cover over the normal plastic one. But that's very, very Rover, because it was all about tacking things on and gluing rubbish to rubbish, really, to create that executive vibe with the glued on wood and things like that. I love them. I love these cars. This particular car actually drives very, very well, because 800s are wildly inconsistent. You know, you get mine, which feels a bit like a shopping trolley, and then you drive another one, same batch, same mileage, same kind of maintenance record, just be even worse. This one is surprisingly good. It feels very tight, pulls very smoothly, and it just gives you a sense of what if, you know, if they were all like that, then maybe it wouldn't have the hideous reputation that it does have today.
For all the BL hate you see splashed across the internet, if nothing else, these cars have produced a strong set of owners clubs which defend their cars, and the Maestro and Montego owners club are no exception to this. I've done videos on both the Maestro and Montego in the past, and whilst not delivering the same buzz as I get driving my Metro, they're brilliant cars and truly deserve garage space with the right owners, even if finding parts is sometimes a bit of a challenge. The Austin Maestro was introduced to replace the Allegro, which had been a car that the buying public either loved or hated. So it's no surprise that they played it safe with the design of the Austin Maestro, which looks far more normal in a car park lineup than your quirky Allegro. The concept of the Maestro began way before launch, and in 1975 it was decided work should begin on a mid-size family car, and the order of the day was to create a hatchback with wide market appeal which could appeal to both the UK and wider European market, which is where hatchbacks were massively popular, and BL saw a space for them to establish a decent market share. Interestingly, although hydrogas seemed to be used left, right and centre, they decided to play it safe with the Maestro, and they rolled it out with a similar setup to VW, which had a front McPherson struts and a trailing arm rear suspension. However, it was back to what was known and trusted on the engine front, and the A-Series was wheeled out once again, and you could have picked a 1 litre or 1.3, however there were also 1.6 and 2 litre engine choices on offer too. And although badge engineering was supposedly done away with in the 70s, the Maestro was sold as the Austin, the Rover, and the sporty version, the MG. Sadly, BL really messed up the luck for the poor Maestro with varying build quality, a rushed effort on the 1.6 R series engine, which was a massive loss because for the first 2 years of production, the car had seen healthy sales and positive press feedback. In my opinion, it's a truly undersold car with massive potential. The Montego, meanwhile, was introduced to replace the Ital and was sold under various marks including Austin and MG, and if you're in India, Taiwan or Trinidad, the Rover Montego, and was in production from 1984 to 1995. An interesting fact to note about these cars is that the Montego and Maestro chassis development for rear suspension was used as basis for later Rover cars and was very well regarded. And although it offered an incredible estate car experience with masses of room inside and a pleasant exterior, the Montego wasn't the big seller it should have been, and it sold less than 500,000 units during its production lifespan. And in 2006, Auto Express said the Montego was Britain's 8th most scrapped car. But fear not, Montego owners, because the Morris Marina beat you to take the top spot on this rather sad list. Now I've had a look at these, let's go and have a look at some of the other fantastic cars on display. This is certainly a rare beast. This is a Princess. Now, a lot of people call them Austin Princesses because abroad they were known as Austin Princesses, and I think because just sat within the BL range, that's what people knew them as. And it may surprise you to know, if you aren't familiar with the car, that this was designed by Harris Mann, the same man who designed the Austin Allegro. And in fact, the Princess, as you see here, looks a lot more similar to the original drawings of the Allegro than the Allegro does to, well, the Allegro. It was a front-wheel drive car, and it was produced from 1975 until 1981 in the UK, but it was produced until 1982 in New Zealand. They're really interesting cars because they weren't a massive seller. However, the ones that seem to be left over are all really, really nice. And you may have spotted one of these in the scrapyard video that I did last year when we explored Belgium. They're interesting cars because they weren't a massive seller, but they are so very unique, a little bit like the Allegro in fact, and to me they are a real luxury car. Now I'm hoping to get this tested on the channel later in the year, but with all the stuff going on with coronavirus, it's been slightly delayed, and I just wanted to kind of include this in the video so you can see the car. It's very original, and it's also very 70s in its livery, and I'm holding myself back from telling you lots about this car because I want to tell you when we take it out for a test drive. However, I did track the owner down, Alan Webb-Moore, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about the car and owning what to me is one of the most special cars here.
Hi, I'm Alan Webb-Moore, and this is my 1978 Austin Princess 2.2 HLS. It's in bronze Reynard metallic, and it has a tobacco vinyl roof. I've had this car about just over 2 years now, and I bought it from a fellow club member in the Gay Classic car group. I've been a fan of Austin Princesses since my dad had one back in the day, and at the age of 14 my dad's Austin Princess was the first car I ever drove, funny enough, around Silverstone without actually sitting on his lap and steering the steering wheel, and since then they've always had a bit of a place in my heart. My partner was always like, oh no, I don't like Austin Princesses, and then this came up for sale and he said, if I have a tattoo you can have an Austin Princess. So then the deal was done, drove down to Southampton where this was, and I bought it and drove it home, and I've loved every minute of driving it. It's quite rare being a manual as opposed to an automatic, and it's here today, and it's never let me down.
Guys, I really hope you've enjoyed my video today of the British Leyland Autumn Rally 2019. Now, as you can probably see from, actually you can't see it so much on this window, but the rain has been horrendous throughout the day, and so many people have turned up. We've seen rare cars, we've seen special cars, we've even seen some amazing Austin Princesses, and also there were more Austin Maxis here at the show today. There were 14 I believe, and last year there were 12, and the weather last year was excellent, so everybody still turned up, and that is true British Leyland spirit for you. So I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed coming to the show today. There are a lot of you that subscribe to my videos that have said hi today, so if you're watching today, I really hope you've enjoyed the show, and thank you for watching and saying hi to me today. And yes, so it leaves me with nothing else to say but take care and drive safely.